Welcome to the Story Vault, where every tale is unlocked. From myths and legends to horror, fantasy, life stories, and real events. Every story has a place here. Now, let's open the vault and begin today's story. In the summer of 1958, Gary, Indiana, was a city that lived and breathed steel. The air itself felt metallic, heavy with the scent of iron ore being smelted in the mills, thick with soot that floated down like dark snow and settled on rooftops, windowsills, and laundry hung out to dry. The mills never slept. Their machinery clanged and roared through the night, a constant industrial lullaby that the city's residents learned to ignore. Gary was built for labor, not leisure. Rows of modest houses stood shoulder to shoulder along narrow streets. Most families kept their front yards neat, with small patches of grass bordered by cracked sidewalks, and a few flowers or shrubs where the soil could be coaxed to yield beauty. Children played stickball in the street, dodging the occasional car, while mothers called out from porches when it was time for supper. In one of these houses, a compact two-bedroom structure at 2300 Jackson Street, lived the Jackson family. Their home was painted a pale color that looked white in the summer sun but gray in the overcast months, its wooden siding weathered by Midwest winters. The inside was tidy but crowded, each piece of furniture chosen for function rather than style. Michael Joseph Jackson was born there on August 29, 1958, the seventh of 9 children. He entered a world that was already bustling with the noise and activity of a large family. By the time he was old enough to toddle around, he had older siblings who were reading, working, and playing, and younger siblings who needed tending. There was no such thing as a quiet house. Catherine Jackson, his mother, was a deeply nurturing woman whose life revolved around her children and her faith as a Jehovah's Witness. Her dark hair was often pulled back, and she wore simple dresses that reflected both her modesty and her practicality. She had a gentle voice, but one that carried authority when needed. Catherine played the clarinet and piano, and she loved to sing, not as a performer seeking an audience, but as a mother filling her home with warmth. Her repertoire leaned heavily on gospel hymns, which she sang while cooking, folding laundry, or rocking a child to sleep. Michael's earliest memories would be infused with the sound of her voice, harmonizing with the soft clatter of pots in the kitchen or the rustle of fabric being folded on the table. Joseph "Joe" Jackson, his father, was a very different presence in the home. Tall, lean, and imposing, Joe had once chased dreams of his own. He played guitar in a small rhythm and blues band called the Falcons, performing at local clubs. But those dreams had been set aside when he took a steady job as a crane operator at U.S. Steel to support his growing family. His hands were calloused from years of factory work, his posture upright with the discipline of a man who took responsibility seriously. Where Catherine gave affection, Joe gave structure. He believed children needed discipline to succeed, and his standards were high. In Joe's eyes, life was a competition, and the only way to win was through relentless hard work. This mindset would later shape Michael in profound ways, instilling both a drive for perfection and a fear of failure. The house was small for 11 people. 2 bedrooms held all the children, often 3 or 4 to a bed. Privacy was rare, the thin walls carrying every sound. The single bathroom was a daily source of negotiation and hurry. In the kitchen, a table barely large enough for the family was squeezed against the wall. Meals were humble fried chicken, cornbread, greens, beans, sometimes fish on Fridays. Catherine stretched every dollar, sewing clothes by hand and patching them when they tore. Shoes were handed down from one child to the next until they wore out completely. Despite the scarcity, there was a rhythm to the household. Mornings began early, with the older children helping the younger ones get dressed for school. Saturdays were for chores, sweeping floors, polishing shoes, tidying the yard. Sundays were for church, where the Jacksons sat together in a pew, their voices blending into the congregation's hymns. Music wasn't just a pastime in the Jackson house, it was the undercurrent of daily life. The radio was a constant companion, tuned to stations that played gospel in the mornings and R&B in the evenings. Michael grew up hearing Sam Cooke's smooth croon, Jackie Wilson's soaring vocals, and the tight harmonies of the Temptations. But it wasn't only professional music that shaped him. Catherine would hum gospel melodies while cooking, her voice rising and falling with the rhythm of her tasks. Joe, when he wasn't working, would sometimes take his guitar down from its place in the corner and play blues riffs, his fingers moving confidently over the strings. Michael absorbed all of it. Even before he could speak in full sentences, he would clap along to the beat or sway in time with the music. Catherine noticed that he could mimic melodies perfectly after hearing them only once or twice. There was an innate precision in his sense of rhythm, an instinct that seemed to guide him without instruction. Michael was a curious child, quick to smile, but also quick to study. When his older brothers Jackie, Tito, and Jermaine began rehearsing as the Jackson Brothers, Michael would sneak into the living room to watch. He was too young to be part of the group, but he learned every song they practiced, every dance step they attempted. Joe noticed his youngest son's fascination, though. He didn't immediately invite him into the group. In Joe's mind, the older boys were the ones carrying the family's musical hopes. That changed one day when Tito, then a teenager, accidentally broke a string on Joe's guitar. Fearing punishment, Tito quickly replaced the string and played a song to prove he could handle the instrument responsibly. Joe was impressed, and his focus on the group intensified. Michael, still on the sidelines, waited for his chance. That chance came during a rehearsal when Joe asked Michael to sing a part, just to fill in for a moment. Michael stepped up to the microphone, small hands gripping it tightly, and sang with a voice that startled everyone in the room. It was pure, strong, and expressive, not the uncertain tone of a child, but the confident delivery of a performer. From that moment, Michael was no longer an observer. Joe made him the lead singer, a decision that would shape the rest of his life. Rehearsals became a central part of Michael's childhood. After school, the brothers would gather in the living room, instruments in hand, while Joe sat nearby, listening intently. Mistakes were corrected immediately, sometimes with sharp words. Songs were repeated again and again, till every note and every step felt like second nature. Michael, though young, absorbed the discipline. He learned that effort and repetition could turn good performances into great ones. At the same time, the long hours meant less time to play with friends or relax like other children his age. When the group began performing locally, Michael's presence on stage was magnetic. He didn't just sing, he told a story with his body and his expressions. He moved with energy, but also with a sense of control, hitting spins, kicks, and slides that he had learned from watching James Brown and Jackie Wilson. Audiences were drawn to him, not only because he was the smallest on stage, but because his confidence seemed to fill the room. The applause was intoxicating, and for Michael, it was proof that all the hours of rehearsal were worth it. They started entering talent shows around Gary, often taking first place. Soon, they ventured beyond their neighborhood, performing in small clubs and theaters in Chicago. These venues were a far cry from the family home, dimly lit rooms heavy with cigarette smoke, the air thick with the smell of alcohol and perfume. Michael was still just a boy, but on stage he matched and yet, even in these first years, there were hints of the cost. Late nights traveling home after gigs, long rehearsals that stretched into the evening, and the quiet pressure that came with knowing the family's hopes were tied to the group's success. Michael embraced the work, but he was already learning that talent alone wasn't enough. Discipline and sacrifice would be constant companions on his path forward.